Evening. Today there is no Volvo at the workshop, but there's a Volvo cylinder head and a load of other shit. Basically, although it's not causing an actual problem yet, as in no overheating or fucking mixing fluids or whatever, the Volvo head gasket, by the looks of it, is on its way, because when you feel the coolant pipes, they're hard. There's too much coolant pressure, and realistically that's a slightly leaking head gasket where the combustion gases are going into the water system, almost certainly anyway. So basically I'm going to whip the head off, change the head gasket and stuff, and do a few bits and bobs, cam out, water pump, whatever. But because these heads, well, these Volvo engines are famous for having absolutely dog shit heads, I'm going to do a bit of self DIY head porting. This is a standard head, a spare one basically. I got like 2 spare engines and this extra spare head, so I'm going to use this as a test bed really. I don't give a fuck if I wreck this one, because I've got 2 complete spare engines plus the one on there, so this is worth the sacrifice if need be. I mean, if this turns out a good job, then fuck it, I'll reuse this one. But I'm basically going to practice and test a few things on this one, and if I wreck it, then whatever. As you can see, I've already took 3 of the cylinders valves out, just that one left. And basically these heads, they're famous for being rubbish basically, and while it seems the norm with Volvo people is to go crazy with them and get big valves fitted and this, that, the other, I've seen people hit in like Sweden or Scandinavia, I can't remember, but certainly somewhere in Scandinavia, dyno proven with standard valve sizes and only, you know, relatively minor porting, and they've seen, I think it was 680 horsepower. So no, they're not that fucking bad. Certainly not the stock valve size isn't. I mean, they're not massive. The inlet valves are big, exhaust valves not so much. The thing is, people bang on about big valve heads, but they only go a little bit bigger. I mean, you can see yourself, there's not even much room to go much bigger. It's just, you know, it's game over quite soon. You know, 1 millimeter extra valve size isn't fucking much, but you know, I can do some porting. I mean, there's no way, if somebody can hit 670 brake or whatever it was on stock valve size, and that was only at 38 psi, it was nothing like, not like he was running like 200 psi, then I'm happy, because I'm never going for anywhere near that power on this thing. But if I can gain some free performance while I've got the head off the old engine, then fucking right I will. People say about how terrible these are, the porting, and yeah, they're not brilliant, but I honestly thought it'd be way worse than this. I thought there was going to be big fucking massive restrictions. There are, you could feel things could be made better, but the how terrible these things are, I feel has been overhyped a bit by the wonders of the internet. They're clearly not good, but I don't know, I cannot see ridiculous gains being had from this. So if people were doing 670 on standard valve sizes, and the bloke who said that said he spent like 2 hours porting the head, nothing much, then surely these stock heads could flow a lot more than most people's bloody Volvos make, and they're still getting the heads ported. But either way, there is some improvements to be made, so I'm going to do it. I'm also going to experiment with a few other things that most people don't do. I've seen all the recommendations of what people do to the heads and this, that, the other, and I do and don't agree with some of it. So as with everything, I'm just going to do it my fucking way. Here we are, all cleaned up. Just literally give it a quick wire wheel and WD-40 and then a bit of brake cleaner and wiped it and whatever does the job. This is the stock exhaust ports, and yeah, they're pretty basic, but they're not fucking appalling. Not at all. They're all about the same. There's obviously, you can see there's you could polish them out to make them a lot smoother, but shape-wise they're not terrible. That is inside where the valve is, and again, they're not fucking brilliant, but it's not like you look at these and being like, oh my god, there's some really obvious gains, because it's just not that shit. Same for this one. You know, you can feel there's like a ridge there. It could be smoother, and on the what they call the short side, so this bit is a bit of a right angle, so that can be improved. That bit there, but it's not that fucking bad. All about the same. Inlet, let's show the inlet ports. There's probably more to be gained on these. Again, they're not fucking appalling, they're just not great. To be honest, the valve stem protruding is probably the most obvious restriction, really. Well, there's two trains of thought with these things. You know, you can cut them flush. I mean, the fucking exhaust port ones are flush anyway. Well, near enough. You can cut them flush. A lot of people say don't. Yeah, technically it can shorten the life of them because they're kind of there to support the valve movement. But when you're not revving to the moon, and also if you saw the length of these, they are fucking long, cutting them down a bit, it's not gonna make a massive difference in my book. And it's not like I'm doing like big miles or big revs. The car probably won't ever see 7,000 RPM, and it's not a daily anyway, and these heads are nothing, so I'm not fussed about worrying about removing them. Again, the short side bit is a bit crap. You could probably improve that. Here again, it could be a lot better. The way it just is kind of abrupt, but it's not fucking, I've seen a lot worse. Do you know what I mean? It's like, they aren't great, but they're not shocking. As you can see, they're all about the same. I'll show you on through the port side. Yeah, you can see it's not fucking brilliant. I mean, that is where like they're kind of ported on the port match to the head from the not the head, port match to the inlet manifold from the factory, and then obviously it could be smoother to there, but again, it's not fucking terrible. Yeah, it's much the same on all of them. Sometimes I wonder if people see the heads, like they take off their old head and it's all manky looking and fucking looks like shit because it's all full of oil and dirt and whatever, and then they get it back from a tuner all super shiny, but in fact not that fucking different, and they get all excited because, yeah, you can make improvements here, but I'd be fairly amazed if like you can make a fucking night and day one. But whatever. Another thing that's controversial, as in most people wouldn't fucking dream of it, but I'm not most people, is the squish pads. I personally don't really believe or have much faith in them on highly tuned turbo cars. On turbo engines, especially ones like this where it's not as if the fucking pistons match, you know, the shape of the squish area anyway. I think, if anything, the flat surfaces just give an area that promotes det. I mean, if you look at detonation on nearly any head, it's nearly always first, if not only, on the squish pads, because flat surfaces is the things where det tends to begin. You look at, well, most places would fucking laugh in your face if you said you was gonna get rid of them or whatever. But you look at any like American drag V8s and stuff, the crazy ones, a lot of them, a lot of top ones, although they don't openly talk about it quite often, they do what they call softened chambers. which basically, obviously a typical V8's got a similar looking head to this. But what they mean by a softened chamber is they either basically remove nearly pretty much all the squish and make it practically like a fucking Hemi head, or, and why it's called soften, is they get rid of all the flat surface. So while it's still this basic shape, this is like a gradual fucking taper in. There's no big flat surfaces to promote that. And that also helps de-shroud the valves a bit, which is good for flow. But most of all is to help prevent that. If you look at RB26s as well, most people, they would act like you're fucking crazy to remove the squish pads, but not like they openly talk about it. Jun, as in one of the most famous RB tuners in Japan, they remove the squish pads completely. So they have what kind of looks like a Hemi head, a circular proper head with no squish pads. And they do it, again, they do it for two reasons: to de-shroud the valves for more flow, and it's less debt on a turbo car. I don't give a fuck what anyone says about it, because the thing is, you know, this is more efficient like this, technically. But when you've got boost, what you really want is no debt on boost and maximum flow. So personally, I am not a fucking fan of squish pads at all. So I am probably, as much as most people would be like, oh, you can't do that, that's fucking stupid, because most of them, because they've never heard of the idea. But I'm gonna probably do something with these. So yeah. Next thing to talk about is a new arrival, which is some ARP head studs from some Swedish tuner, Ultra Motors AB. And it's all in bloody Swedish, but it's installing ARP head studs. You don't need to be fluent in Swedish for that. And I guess that means head studs in Swedish. Anyway, and standard, completely from the factory, L-ring head gasket. Seems weird going for head studs but a stock gasket, but that is the Volvo red block way. Turns out the standard head gasket is fine even at fucking ridiculous levels of power, 500 brake plus, and the stock head gasket is better than anything. To be honest, because of that, it's really hard to find anything but the stock head gasket. Cometic do one, but it's not common, considering there's 1,000,001 cams and all sorts for these engines, and manifolds and all sorts. There's only one other head gasket behind a stock one, and it's Cometic. Well, apart from like fancy Cooper's rings one and you know, that kind of thing, but a you know, conventional style head gasket, everyone uses a stock one, and I ain't going for mental power, so am I. Here it is on the head, and here's some weird info for you. As you can see, this matches the cylinders really well, this head gasket. As you can see, well, it matches combustion chambers, and that's because it's 93 mil, which is basically the B21, kind of the original Volvo red block size. And as you can imagine, combustion chambers would be designed to match the fucking engine, and that's the original B21 2.1 Volvo red block engine. What was in the original like 240 turbo cars, which was used in like Group A touring cars and all sorts. It was this, but my engine is a B200, a later one, which weirdly is smaller bore. It's 89 mil. Obviously you couldn't have a smaller head gasket than this, they would fucking overlap. So what really does happen, and it's sort of unfortunate, but it's not a big deal, is my cylinders slightly shroud the combustion chamber. You know, you'd think, oh, you know, that's a bit shit, but if you look at LS V8s, most of them do it. You know, people fit the big heads off, you know, the bigger engines, you know, LS3 heads or whatever, to the 4.8 and 5.3s, which have got massively smaller bores than the bigger LSs, but they do it for more flow, and they're making like, you know, 1,000+ horsepower on those with exactly the same situation, but far worse. It's not a thing. It's not a big issue at all. Yes, technically, you know, it's shrouding the valves slightly, but it doesn't fucking matter. You know what I think's worse? The B230, the common popular engine, the bore of that is 96 mil. So obviously much closer, you know, much closer to the edges. I mean, you add another, you know, 3.5, 4 mil on that. It's most of it, they're almost fucking touching, which A, isn't great for things like head gasket strength and so on. But the bigger thing for me, because they always say, oh, the smaller bore engines, you know, B200s, B21s, whatever, the smaller bore, you know, means they're less prone to debt. And people always say it like it's just the fact that it's a smaller bore, but it's not, in my opinion. The reason it's less prone to debt is because the bigger bore means there's more of a fucking area of flat surface around there. And with that flat surface, any flat surfaces, like I said earlier on this video, fucking promotes detonation. So in my opinion, they're probably, you know, I don't know for sure, but common sense and understanding how engines work and the fucking experience of fucking tuning crazy turbo shit and seeing things blow up is the fact you've got another like 3 or 4 mil, so a couple of mil either side, but 3 or 4 mil of flat surface, because all these heads are the same, be it a fucking, no matter what red block, it's the same head. Well, there's 530 and 531 heads, but that doesn't make any difference to anything like this. If we're talking these normal 530 heads, they're all the same. There's no like wider combustion chambers for the 96, you know, mil bore ones. They're all the same fucking bore. And while the 200s like I'm using is slightly small, in my opinion, slightly too big, while yes, it would flow a bit better, is way more prone to debt. And yeah, it's fucking not good, in my opinion. There's been these Volvo tuners for fucking decades, and I'm new to this shit, so no one would listen to me, but look at it, it's fucking fact. I mean, there'll be a relatively easy solution to it. You would literally chamfer, smooth in, soften the combustion chamber edges so it would match the 96, but leaving it the normal flat surface, fuck that. You know, it's not for me. As much as people like to talk about quench, nah, it's the bigger fucking quench which is probably making the debt in my book. So yeah, what I'll also do now is show you how well things do or don't match. This is on here, well, partly so I could see what I'll probably do in a minute is mark with a marker pen sort of any area that could possibly be modified, because it's not in the gasket area, which is pretty much nothing on these edges, maybe a tiny bit, but I don't think I'd want to risk it, but mostly these here. Next I want to check is how well the gaskets line up to the ports. There is a bit of meat that you could take out of that, not much, but a bit, but that's not really what I was wondering. What I'm mostly wondering is, in comparison, how much would that match on the inlet manifold, because that's what really matters. I mean, and my main worry would be if these ports are smaller than the ports on the inlet manifold, because if it's hitting any flat surfaces, that's fucking shit for flow. Smaller to big, no big deal. Bigger to small is shit. So luckily I've got a spare inlet manifold. Not too bad. I reckon then the inlet ports on the head are certainly bigger than these, so there's not going to be a step. So yeah, not too bad. Could potentially leave that. I might open them out slightly more just because I can. Let's do the same on the exhaust ports. Quite a lot of meat to go bigger if you wanted to. I thought they would, just by looking at the lines left behind from previous gaskets. It's quite a lot. And again, it's the thing about a step is the problem. So is the exhaust manifold even smaller than that? I can't imagine it, but let's have a look. Got one spare here again. Yeah, the exhaust ports on the exhaust manifold are definitely bigger than the ones on the head, so there's not a step. That's good. There's not a step down. It's always going to be expanding, and I could always make these a little bit bigger to match. So yeah, all in all, not too bad. Right, here is the result of my experimenting with a spare head, and to be honest, it's gone quite well. I mean, this isn't finished, as in nothing I've done is like, you know, perfect, but this is just for me to get a general idea of what I want to do. Remember I said about what they call softening the chambers, as in getting rid of these big flat areas? Well, I've done that to one, obviously not completely finished, but you get a good idea of what I mean. You don't remove the lot. Well, you can do, but considering you want the airflow to be directed towards the exhaust valve especially, but you know, generally around the valve area, removing the lot, I don't really think it's necessarily any real gains on this. There's still a bit to go because there's still a flat area there, but this is just to get an idea. But as you can see, it's the same basic shape, but all this flat area is now contoured, curved down. There's no flat areas for detonation, really. Anything that sort of encourages detonation, I would have to do a little bit more because I've not done enough, you know, but this isn't complete. This is purely, you know, to make sure it's possible on these heads. And yeah, it is. I thought it would be because, you know, these are no different to the V8 heads that they do this on a lot for turbo cars. So yeah, it's just generally getting rid of that flat area, because obviously you've already got nice curved areas there, and it's just enlarging them. I probably could take off more there if I wanted to, but I need to look into if that's a good idea. I mean, generally, it might deshroud the exhaust valve a little bit, but I don't know. Probably, looking at it now, if I remove a bit of that to help deshroud the exhaust valve a bit, is probably a good shout. It's better than standard, but I reckon, considering the air is mostly want to go out there, making this one more like this one, because obviously as standard there's a lot going on there to let the air come out the inlet valve, but then here less so. I need to look into it. Obviously, you know, this isn't finished, this is just an experiment, but yeah, generally that'll work. On to the porting. This is a stock inlet port, which is obviously you've got the big rise from the valve stem. You've got quite a big ridge all around here where it suddenly juts out. It's just pretty horrible, to be fair. There's a big ridge there, and this inner, what they call the short radius, this bit here, the short side, is quite sudden, and you know, it goes suddenly there and then up. So yeah, but this is one I've modified, obviously not finished, but modified. I've literally removed, well, rather, the valve stem is now flush, basically. The ridge that was originally on that one is now completely gone. It's now, the whole bowl is a uniform size. You know, there's no real ridge at all now. Just goes up to flush with the valve seats, nice and smooth. On the short side bit, again, that's massively different. Let's see if I can show you this hard with the light, but obviously you can see there's quite a lip there, and it's relatively narrow. And suddenly, you know, considering the valve size, the actual opening is relatively narrow. Whereas we go to this one, and there is now, it's a contour all the way up like that, so there's no sudden edge, just proper radius, and it actually goes out to the size of the valve, well, what do you want to call it, a bowl, smoother, rather than the sudden nothing to something in that one. There's not much else apart from obviously finishing the job, getting it nice and smooth, because this is just a rough thing to make sure I've not done anything fucked up. There's not loads more I can do. I don't want to really go much higher, because obviously that supports the valve seat. I don't really think any wider is really doing much good, because it's already wider than the port anyway. And I've heard people say about, oh, breaking through to a water jacket. I don't know how far you'd have to go for that, but I can't see any big advantage of going much further than this. So yeah, I'll show you on the actual inlet side of it. Again, I've not port matched it or brought the ports out at all, because I don't think there's anything really to be gained. The only thing I've done, apart from a general clean up, is all of these have, how well you can see, I don't know, but they've all got like quite a noticeable ridge. This bit here, on the, you know, the rest of it not too bad, but this side there's a very noticeable ridge, so the airflow goes there and then suddenly it's a bump and then it goes up, which is shit. On this one I've removed that ridge, so now it is a straight shot basically. I don't know if with a torch you can see things much better. Maybe if I do that. No, that's too much. No, that's not too bad. you see the airflow is pretty much a straight shot now. I could probably remove a bit more just where it opens up to the valve, you know, but generally, yeah, it's just a straight port. Whereas this one, as you can probably see with that dark line, there's like a ridge all of a sudden all the way across it. It's a bump basically. So the airflow goes sort of that way and then back up again. Whereas this one, the ridge is, even though this isn't finished, pretty much non-existent. So it should work way better. I can't see, apart from obviously the general smoothing everything off and tidying it up, much else you can do to improve flow on this. I mean, I'm no fucking expert, but my common sense and experience says there isn't a massive amount. Maybe more that short side, the inner curve. Don't know, but yeah. Right, I'll show you the exhaust side now. Right, the exhaust port, in all honesty, there wasn't all that much I could fucking do. Again, I've sort of improved that short side a bit, but it's so close to where the valve seat starts. You can't really take much off it, because if you take much more off it, there's nothing holding the valve seat in properly, and that ain't good. So that's not, you know, there's not much you can do there. The main thing I've done, you'll probably see, apologise for the flickery camera light. If I show this, maybe if I use the exhaust port, there you go. You can probably see by the shadow, there's a big fucking ridge there. It goes all the way around, but you can see that there's quite a ridge, especially on the sides. Like I said, there's not much you can do to improve that short side. You can a bit, which I have, but this ridge is horrible, and it goes all the way around to some extent. And on this one, as you can hopefully see, it's not really there anymore. I can't realistically remove much more, because again, you'd end up compromising how the fucking valve seat sat in. But it's now a smooth, obviously the gas going that way, but a smooth exit, no big ridge. Obviously these have got pretty much flush valve stems as standard, but I've made it slightly more flush. Obviously it would need smoothing out massively still, but you know, you get the idea. On the port itself, on the exhaust side, again, there's not a fucking huge amount you can do apart from generally smooth things off. I mean, this is a standard one, and all you kind of can do is make the angle of the where the exhaust port goes to the valve slightly less severe, which I've done. But apart from that, it's just a case of smoothing everything off. There's no, maybe I'm missing something, but there's no fucking magic on the exhaust port at all. How well you can see this, I don't know, but I'll try. But this is with the valves in, and by my eyes at least, but you probably, well, you maybe can't tell on the camera, but the difference is more apparent on what I've done. This is a standard port, and as you can kind of see, this is exhaust port, this is. As you kind of see, it kind of just goes in and suddenly just goes into quite a tight, almost circle, like they just drilled straight downwards. You know, there's no blend from one thing to the other. It just bang straight to quite a tight circle, the size of the exhaust valve. Whereas on the one I've done, hopefully you can tell, it's more of a transition. It, rather than looking like just a straight up circle drilled in with ridges and shit, it's now kind of more of an opening. I don't know how to explain it, but it's it's certainly freer flowing for sure. Just by looking at it, I'm sure this camera isn't doing it fucking justice at all, because I'm literally holding a torch with one hand and a bloody GoPro with another. But yeah, it's the actual transition from, you know, the valve, where the valve sits, to the port is far better than standard. Not much else I can do, but that is the main difference. As you'd imagine, the inlet port is maybe more noticeable difference. You can see that ridge along the back there very, very clearly, and how it sort of necks right in on the sides. So it goes from what is a round port to a fucking very, well, it's an oval, a tall, skinny oval, almost a fucking rectangle. In fact, it's a bit crap as standard, you must admit. But that ridge is particularly terrible, and obviously you've got the big valve stem, whereas this one I've modified. It is, although not quite yet, but I've got more I can do. But as you can see, it's pretty much stays a circle all the way from start to finish, all the way to the valve stem. And the valve stem is now flush, which, you know, I don't care what anyone says, that's got to make a fair difference. A pretty much straight shot round port than originally, well, fucking far from it. A bloody round to almost a rectangle. Look, and that fucking ridge along the back, I don't know, that there, you can see sort of halfway up the port, that ridge is pretty significant. Whereas it's gone now. Obviously there's a lot more polishing and smoothing to make it how I want it, but I'm probably not going to even use this head. This was just a practice head in case I fucked it right up, but the practice seems to have worked well, so this is what I'll likely do to the other head. That's enough for me and this head shenanigans. I've done some experimenting, and it kind of worked out what I had in my mind is look like it's going to work. And actually the head porting looks like it's more of an improvement now I've done it than I thought it would beforehand. So yeah, I kind of agree now with what the people said about the stock ports and stock head flow being shit, because what I've done has probably made a fair old difference. But I don't know, I'm gonna have to do it properly on the head I'm gonna use. Now I know it from this practice head, and fucking send it. If it works, happy days. If it don't, well, I've got 2 other spare heads, and these Volvo red block heads aren't worth any money, so you can pick another one up for a tenner if you had to. So yeah, anyway, I'm off. See you later.